going to happen here.
We're not going to dance. I know
That's
that.
right. Stand closer. Come on over. Okay. Everybody ready? Today we celebrate a victory not only for Kentucky farmers, but also for health care and early childhood services funded by the 1998 Master Settlement Agreement between states and tobacco companies. For some time now, a complex national legal battle has created a cloud of uncertainty around Kentucky's receipt of annual tobacco payments dating back to 2003. Today I'm here with Attorney General Jack Conway to announce an agreement that will dissipate that cloud and bring certainty and stability to Kentucky's MSA funds. The agreement settles 10 years of disputed claims, starting with the 2003 payments and running through 2012. Under the agreement, Kentucky stands to receive $57.2 million more in MSA payments over the next 3 years than budgeted. We also bring to an end what has been a long and expensive legal battle that promised to be even longer and even more expensive. So this is a significant win for every Kentuckian. There is a long list of programs funded with MSA payments, including agriculture investments, health, and early childhood programs. This settlement will allow us to restore cuts required in the current budget when our 2014 payment was lower than expected, and it will make it more probable that the programs in the upcoming 2 years will be fully funded. To date, Kentucky has invested more than $400 million in county, regional, and state projects designed to increase net farm income and create sustainable farm-based business enterprises. Since the inception of the program in January of 2001, we've funded more than 4,800 projects that built markets for Kentucky agricultural products, added value to those products, and explored new opportunities for Kentucky farmers. Likewise, we have funded an array of programs related to health care and to children, like smoking cessation, lung cancer research, children's mental health, the HANDS program, and Healthy Start initiatives. The agreement we're announcing today restores long-term stability of the MSA payments that fund those very programs. By joining 22 other states in settling, Kentucky escapes that chaotic landscape of future legal battles, as well as saves itself from the financial and administrative cost of litigating these decades-old events. I want to say a special thanks and congratulations to Attorney General Jack Conway, who has been fighting these battles now for some time and who was instrumental in working out this very favorable settlement for the people of Kentucky. And I'd like to call on our Attorney General to say a few words. Jack?
Thank you, Governor. Thanks. Complicated and chaotic is what the governor called it. That might have been an understatement, hard to believe. In 1998, the Commonwealth of Kentucky entered into the historic Master Settlement Agreement with the country's 4 largest tobacco manufacturers, Philip Morris, Lorillard, Brown & Williamson, and R.J. Reynolds. Many other smaller tobacco companies subsequently agreed to sign on. The tobacco companies entered into the MSA with the attorneys general and with the states to pay for hundreds of millions of dollars that they had caused the states to incur in smoking-related illnesses of their citizens. It was the largest class action lawsuit in the history of the United States. In addition, it has also limited cigarette advertising, specifically to children, and it has helped reduce smoking. Since 1997, United States cigarette consumption has declined by more than 40%, and smoking amongst our high school students has been cut in half. Gone are the images of Joe Camel, Virginia Slim's tennis tournaments, and the Winston Cup. And the Master Settlement Agreement, worked out by attorneys general, has been worth over $229 billion to the 52 states and territories. To date, Kentucky has received well over $1 billion in these payments, and as the governor mentioned, hundreds of millions of dollars from the MSA have been invested to increase farm income, diversify our crops, and to create business opportunities for our farmers. We've also devoted a significant portion of this fund to our public health initiatives, including anti-smoking campaigns and a cancer research doctrine. UK and U of L both have benefited greatly from putting these research dollars to work. And we've also funded something that's near and dear to my heart, early childhood education in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. These funds are critical, and we cannot afford to lose them. Each year, the companies make payments to the states, and in turn, the states have the duty to enforce the terms of the MSA agreement by policing those non-participating manufacturers, the tobacco companies that operate outside of this framework. The tobacco companies some time ago decided to challenge the enforcement efforts of the states. The first year that was challenged was 2003. This challenge was over enforcement efforts that took place more than a decade ago, long before your previous governor or attorney general. And in the arbitration, to determine whether or not Kentucky diligently enforced its actions with regard to non-participating manufacturers, the state was represented by outside counsel, and the arbitration panel ruled, and we feel incorrectly, they ruled that Kentucky was one of a handful of states that did not diligently enforce in 2003. So after 9 years of protracted and complicated and chaotic litigation, Kentucky faced a difficult prospect. And I faced a difficult prospect, and the administration faced a difficult prospect. We were in danger of losing half of our payment for this current fiscal year, 2014. We're in danger of losing nearly $50 million. And the tobacco companies could challenge our enforcement each and every year in subsequent years leading up to the present, leaving our payments in limbo, costing the state millions of dollars in litigation fees, and with no resolution in sight well into the next decade. This wasn't going to work for Kentucky. It wasn't going to work for our agricultural families. It wasn't going to work for our early childhood development programs. It wasn't going to work for our public health programs that we've all come to hold dear. We were in serious jeopardy. As your Attorney General, I engaged in a two-track approach. First, we have what's known as an MSA court, which is Franklin Circuit Court. We challenged the adverse arbitration ruling in Franklin Circuit Court. We made the argument, and I think a compelling one, that the ruling against Kentucky was arbitrary and capricious. At the same time, over the last 7 months, I've been confidentially negotiating with the various tobacco companies to see if there was a post-arbitration resolution to the situation we both found ourselves in. And we managed to get the train back on the tracks. So to that end, in the coming weeks, the tobacco companies will be releasing $110 million in disputed payments to the Commonwealth of Kentucky. This settlement we're announcing today restores about $45 million in payment to fiscal year 2014. So that in 2014, I want the folks in the agriculture community to hear me loud and clear. I want the folks in the public health community to hear me loud and clear. I want those in early childhood education to hear me loud and clear. We're getting our full payment in 2014. We're getting our full payment in 2014. We will get the full tobacco payments as budgeted in the recent biennial budget for fiscal year 2015, which is about $100 million, and for 2016. In addition to that, we're getting an extra $57 million for these efforts, or to be spent as the General Assembly sees fit. This is great news for our farmers. It's great news for our communities. It's great news for our health advocates. And frankly, it's great news for all Kentuckians. I appreciate Governor Beshear and his staff for their work and working with us so diligently. The Master Settlement Agreement is complicated. The attorneys general have to manage it from a legal standpoint. The money comes to the Governor's Office of Agricultural Policy and to the Agricultural Diversification Board. We stayed in constant communication with the Governor's Office about our arbitration, about settlement possibilities, and I appreciate his work and his staff's work to help us hammer out this agreement. It's going to end costly litigation and do right by our communities for decades to come. So with that, we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
You say it'll make the full payment, budgeted payment for 2015, 2016. Does it make less than what we anticipated down the road? I assume there was some gain for the companies in this negotiated agreement.
Can we address that?
Yeah.
Okay. It's important, Ronnie, to understand that we were getting our full payment, which was somewhere in the neighborhood of $95 million in a typical year for the last few years. On the side, pursuant to the Master Settlement Agreement, they could put into what's known as a disputed payments account, withhold some money if they thought states like Kentucky didn't diligently enforce and collect the escrow tax from non-participating manufacturers. So this money was always being withheld. And the consensus forecasting group has to make an estimate of the tobacco payments based on, okay, what are they going to withhold? What are we going to get? And so the estimates have been in that range. And sometimes you get a little more, sometimes you get a little less. And there's always budget language as it pertains to the tobacco settlement agreement. And there's also a statute that sets out the 50, 25, 25 split for the money to agricultural diversification, into healthcare, and to early childhood. This is a release of those disputed payments. So what it allows us to do is, in the wake of that arbitration loss, which cut our payment in half, the way that they were going to collect their money was to cut our current payments in half. They're releasing that. We get our full payment for 14. We'll be able to make what's budgeted, which I think is $99.7 million in 2015, and somewhere in the neighborhood of 72 or 73 million for the following year, because they didn't know about future arbitrations. Those will all be made in full, and there'll be an excess of 57 beyond that. And going forward, we have long projections going out. The master settlement is sort of budgeted for 26 years, but you have payments into perpetuity. And the consensus forecasting group, based on cigarette usage and a host of other factors, projects those payments going forward. But they should be in the neighborhood of what the payments have traditionally been.
Is it already designated how this money will be spent, or will it have any effect on the budget shortfall we expect at the end of this fiscal year? Can you use money to address that?
I believe, and I'll look at my budget director to make sure I'm correct, that the statutory language of the statute that addresses these monies prohibits any tobacco settlement monies from being spent on anything other than what is addressed in the statutes. In other words, the 50, 25, 25. Is that correct? Now, obviously, the General Assembly can change that, and you know, should we end up in January of 2015 in a situation where the General Assembly desired to change that and utilize some of that money elsewhere, they have the ability to do that.
Does this settlement prevent tobacco companies from challenging future payments?
Yes, this settles all of our claims regarding diligent enforcement from 2003 up to 12 or 13 when we have data available. So it took 9 years to litigate one calendar year. The first year they started challenging was 2003, and it took 9 years to litigate that issue. And so given that we've settled this, I have a hard time seeing any more challenges in the future.
So then the tobacco companies don't get anything out of this?
No, this is an argument over the split of the disputed payments account. And we say, okay, did you diligently enforce, didn't you? So there was this pot of money that was being withheld that originally would have been part of our payment and wasn't. And so this has been held over in escrow for a period of years. And the argument has been, if we diligently enforced, then you shouldn't be withholding our payment. You need to give us that money. And they're saying, no, if you didn't diligently enforce, we have the ability to withhold and take away from your tobacco payment. So there's been this disputed account where money's been collecting for a period of time. And so this is the release of that money that provides us certainty. And there's a split between the state. Okay, the state gets in 1 year, we get this amount of money, and then going forward. And I think eventually, the first year, we take a bit of a haircut because we did lose the arbitration. But going forward, where's Sean? What's the actual split going forward?
We get 45 cents on the dollar.
Yeah, 45 cents on the dollar from that disputed account.
General, when did you start those negotiations?
We lost the arbitration in September of last year, as I heard from our agricultural community almost instantaneously. A lot of people were concerned because a lot of these, you have the state diversification program, but 35% of the agriculture money goes to county programs. I heard from UK and their extension agents. I heard from a lot of people worried that they wouldn't fund some important programs. So I could tell that people in our agricultural community were hurting and were concerned. And when I'd pass Roger Thomas in the hallway, all he'd do is put his head down and goes, "Please do something about that payment. Please do something about that payment." So I went to work nearly immediately. And I held my first private meeting with members of the tobacco companies in, I think it was around the 1st of November. I traveled to New Orleans. I've been to Atlanta, Cincinnati, quietly doing this. We've had to be coy in front of legislative committees at times, and I hope they understand because we were in very sensitive private negotiations. And so we've been at this now, I guess that makes it 7 or 8 months that we've been involved in this process. Because we engaged in that dual strategy of also litigating, and it looked like we might get a favorable decision out of Franklin Circuit, I think we had some leverage with them. And we also have a most favored nation clause in this agreement. So any of the states that were found non-diligent, they're not going to get a better deal than Kentucky. We've cut just about the best deal that any state found non-diligent can cut.
I'm confused about fiscal year 15. We're going to get less receipts than budgeted. So.
If I'm correct, Jack, you correct me if I'm wrong, under the settlement for the next 3 years, when you add up the pluses and minuses, we are going to be able to fill the hole that was created in 14 and fully fund what's budgeted. I think there was a slight shortfall in 15 that we're going to be able to fill, and so you'll have a fully budgeted 15 and a fully budgeted 16, and then still have the $57 million.
That's correct. The slight dip in 15 is actually due to the consensus forecasting group, because the consensus forecasting group gets together and says, okay, we expect the payment will be $95 million. It's never exact, or it might be 93. And they looked at, okay, we've lost, and we expected 91. We got half of that because we lost the arbitration. Looking forward, they said, okay, it took 9 years. Now we're going on to litigating 2004 and diligent enforcement. They didn't think that there would be any kind of outcome to arbitration by the time 2015 came around. So you see them estimating a $99.7 million payment. When they had to forecast 2016, I think what they said is, okay, we have to discount this somewhat. We don't know that we're going to be able to litigate in 2 years this next year, but they start lining them up. Are we in some jeopardy? So you see the forecasts for our payment going down a little bit because of that uncertainty. And so what we're able to do is, and that's why they put the lesser amount in the state budget for the tobacco payment. And so with this settlement, we fully fund 2014, we fully fund the 2 years that are appropriated in the biennium, and there's $57 million in addition.
And how many states are in the agreement? He says
Kentucky becomes the 23rd.
So there are 23 states?
There are 22 originally settling states. There were 6 states to have that right found non-diligent. We were one of 6 states. And Kentucky is the first state to have been found not to diligently enforce to settle.
Governor, do you think Kentucky has spent enough of its money in smoking cessation programs, or should the General Assembly change it to
Well, with our smoking problem in this state, and by that I mean we rank right at the top of all states in the number of folks who smoke. And we all know that that's not healthy, and we have worked for years in various ways to try to wean folks off of smoking because of health issues. We can always use more money on smoking cessation. The good news is that in addition to these funds that can flow into smoking cessation, with the new essential benefits of the Affordable Care Act, now in our Medicaid program, smoking cessation is covered. And so we will have a lot more folks involved in smoking cessation in the future.
Anything else? What day was the agreement reached, and when did the funds, or when are they released from escrow?
I signed the papers yesterday. So we were, when you're going back and forth with companies like RJR and Philip Morris, it gets pretty complicated. So there are many versions. I signed the term sheets yesterday. We began briefing people, members of the legislature and stakeholders this morning, and we expect the money to be released within a couple weeks.
Does this impact the budget shortfall at all?
No, this at the present time won't have any effect on the potential budget shortfall that we're talking about. As I mentioned earlier, the statutes on the books concerning MSA money specifically indicate that these monies can only be spent on the programs set out in the statutes, the 50% to agriculture and the 25 to health and the 25 to early childhood.
How long does this agreement last? It started in '99, and is it even for how many years?
It was originally valued because they had to put an estimate on it and say it was 200 and however many billion, they originally valued it as a 25 or 26 year. That's the window that's used to value it, but the actual language expects us to carry on until perpetuity. That the payments, just because the 25 or 26 years runs out, doesn't stop the obligation. As long as they're selling cigarettes, they have an obligation to pay. It's into perpetuity.
The two of you called it complicated and chaotic.
Try to write it.
Yeah,
try to write
yeah,
it.
try. Yeah.
But I'm unclear. I understand we put this money in a disputed payment account. But the tobacco companies in the states are arguing over how much of that money each is due. I'm assuming the tobacco companies didn't settle by giving 100% of what the
No.
state asked for. That
No.
was the question I asked earlier.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So as we go forward, there's some diminution of the money that we might have expected as a part of this negotiation.
That's fair to say. Had we won every single arbitration and had been found to diligently enforce for a decade, and a decade down the road, the money is released, yeah, that we could have gotten more. Now, we thought we diligently enforced in every year, but Kentucky we've got a peculiar vulnerability, if you will, in that in the early years of the MSA, we have a lot of smaller tobacco producers and a lot of smaller cigarette manufacturers that were difficult to track. And our revenue cabinet was having to stamp the cigarettes and so forth. So once we lost the arbitration, when we thought we were going to win it, when we thought we had good proof, we were at a particular vulnerability to lose subsequent arbitrations, which could result in further losses to the payment and could have potentially taken us from a payment of $90 or $100 million to payments every year of $30, $40, $45 million. So given that it was going to be protracted and given that it was going on, there was no end in sight, and given the time value of money and the needs of this state and our agriculture community and our health community right now, I think this is a good deal for the state. It's a really good deal for the state.
And I understand that we saved ourselves from going from 95 to 30 or 40, but for the benefit of the readers, can you ballpark at the top end what it would have been, what we've given up as part of the negotiation?
Didn't they say something like 45 cents on the?
Was that what that referred to?
Yeah,
45 cents on the dollar. You got it? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Wow.
You can catch us. You can catch us after we get off. All right.
All right. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.